This was made by a plasma rifle.
We'd been fighting for a while. On the 7th day, we ran out of ammo.
Where's Master Chief's grave?
I don't think anyone really knows. There was a ceremony 5 years ago, over there.
We had to scavenge all we could from the weapons that had been left behind.
We saw a lot of these. This is an old Covenant weapon. It's a spike rifle. We call it the Spiker.
And who used it?
Well, the brutes mostly. We got word the Covenant was out here hunting us, and that Master Chief wouldn't be able to rendezvous with us until dawn, so we had to go dark.
When Master Chief armed his grenade, I was in the back of an overturned warthog firing an M41.
Chief told me once that no soldier should be honored for doing what is expected.
If there's one reason why we're here, I would say it's because of the Chief.
We knew Master Chief was still in the fight. He gave us hope.
Do you believe that?
I did. And I still do.
Halo 3. For many, this is the game that started it all, and to date is still the best-selling Halo game of all time. Halo 2 helped to change the way we perceive video games. They were out of the niche and were now a financial institution that could rival blockbuster movies with their releases. And Halo 3 set the bar ridiculously high for a game launch all over again, along with skyrocketing the status of Xbox Live to the amazingly popular online service that many others would use as inspiration for countless subscription services these days. Thanks for draining my bank account every month, you stingy little shit. With 1 million players online within the first 20 hours alone, Lord knows how many hours worth of content made using the game's host of features, Halo 3 was on track to change the world all over again, just like its predecessors. But what did it do differently? What makes Halo 3 distinct from its precursors and helps it stand the test of time arguably better than Halo's Combat Evolved in 2? And no, it's not just the A-tier graphics. What makes Halo 3 the best, in my opinion, and easily one of the most influential video games of all time? Hello there guys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leipalarden, and we're back from a little Christmas hiatus to talk about Halo 3. If Halo 2 was my entry to the franchise, Halo 3 was what sealed the deal for me and made sure I was never turning back. To say Halo 3 has a lot of sentimental value for me is an understatement. It was the first game I ever owned and played on the Xbox 360, and it was the first game that I was ever truly hyped for. Remember my Halo 2 retrospective? If you don't? Well, go back and watch it then, and come back here when you're done with it. Like I said in that video, my first experience with Halo was sitting in my friend's garage at the ripe old age of 6, taking turns with the controller whenever one of us died while playing Halo 2's campaign, and we all know how it ended.
Master Chief, do you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
You kidding me? No! You serious?
So the first thought on my mind is, what now? Well, an awesome marketing campaign is what now, arguably the best for any video game ever. When the first Halo 3 trailer dropped at E3 2006, I remember watching it in all of its 360p glory on a computer running Windows XP and Internet Explorer, and the video took so long to load, my friend and I had to play a few rounds of Dead or Alive before YouTube did its thing. Was that the type of game I should have been playing as a 6-year-old? Probably not. But when that trailer finally loaded though, it was well worth the wait. Suddenly, Halo 3's marketing was kicking into gear. I'm talking the Believe marketing campaign. Landfall. Can you imagine seeing Landfall as a 6-year-old?
That was totally wicked!
More trailers, more hype, more nagging my parents to give me an Xbox 360, and then finally the game drops. The day of, you knew exactly where I was. My friend's garage, tub of chocolate Yogo in hand, and we could not wait to play it. Suffice to say, I was expecting a lot from this game, and, well, surprisingly, my expectations were more than just met, they were exceeded. Halo 3 is like the Return of the Jedi, or of the King to Halo 2's Empire Strikes Back or Two Towers. It's not as complex or nuanced as Halo 2, but it does deliver a finale that is very satisfying for a franchise as beloved as Halo. Halo 3 is Bungie firing on all cylinders, sticking to their guns and following their rule of cool, delivering a game that to this day looks better than some being released now. Marty O'Donnell, Michael Salvatore, on form, bringing their A games, and they had the chance to work with actual orchestras to fully realize some of their most beloved pieces from previous games. The multiplayer continued what worked so well and added a ton of new features. If Combat Evolved changed the way first-person shooters were made and played, and Halo 2 set the bar for online multiplayer, taking an enormous risk on the then new addition to households of the broadband internet connection, Halo 3 revolutionized community features and the longevity of games, while also helping to influence the single most important platform of all time and how video games were perceived on it, the internet. But before we get to that, let's address the flipped elephant in the room. I've heard some pretty varied reactions to Halo 3's story over the years, and it's hard to not mention its older brother Halo 2 in the same breath. Everything ranging from it being a bad follow-up that isn't tightly written and fails to carry over the core themes of Halo 2, to being the best in the series with the highest possible stakes. To be fair though, I don't think you need to have a ton of character development like Halo 2 or the emotional weight of 4 or Infinite to have a great story. That's just an added bonus. Not to say Halo 3 doesn't have emotional weight, there's a lot of that in this game, and the last 15 or so minutes, everything from killing Spark onwards, I've known people who played Halo for the first time who teared up over that ending. Surprisingly, the development for Halo 3 went considerably better than Combat Evolved in 2. There was still crunch on Halo 3, but nowhere near as awful as it was with Bungie's previous endeavors. The game was taking shape fairly well, but due to how rough Halo 2's development was, it led to the absence of Bungie co-founder Jason Jones and head writer of the previous Halo titles, Joseph Staten. Halo 3's story was left in a tricky spot without those two. Bungie was essentially without its leader, and a power vacuum was beginning to form, with the likes of Max Hoberman, Halo 2's multiplayer creative lead, Jamie Griesmer, gameplay design lead for all the Halo games, Marcus Leto, the art director, and a few others, and it was up to other studio heads to pick up the crumbs of Halo 2's original ending that was cut due to time constraints and development pressure, and essentially make a full game out of those crumbs of ideas that were left. The first version of the script was written by multiple people and had almost nothing to do with the story that came before it. Lord Hood, played by Ron Perlman, and Miranda Keyes were absent from the story, and for a final chapter in a trilogy there was a major lack of any meaningful sacrifice.
Man, do I really want to give all this credit to Marty?
Funnily enough, it was audio director Marty O'Donnell who sat down all the major heads and board members of Bungie and ran by a few plot points that helped to make the story more emotionally impactful. However, Halo 3 still doesn't quite stack up to its predecessor, and I think this was a side effect of too many cooks in the kitchen syndrome. People agreeing and disagreeing on different things, and a few poor chefs, or in this case, writers, stuck in the middle trying to appeal to all of them. The fact Halo 3 turned out as good as it did despite its bare-bones story, well, it's something of a miracle. Could I go into the philosophy of a character like Sergeant Johnson and discuss the pseudo-father-like role he has with Miranda Keyes after failing to protect her late father Jacob? Or the Prophet of Truth's descent into complete madness, going from a calculating, sly con artist to a delusional maniac? Sure, I could, but a game first and foremost should be fun and replayable, and Halo 3 tackles both of those challenges exceptionally well. Its campaign is a little shorter than the others, but it also doesn't outstay its welcome. Unlike CE and 2, where some missions just felt like they went on forever, Halo 3's missions are all varied, which helps them stand apart from each other while still managing to progress in a logical way, despite how often you change locations. You don't spend one mission going through half a dozen corridors only to then 3 missions later go back through those same corridors but in reverse. Each mission is clearly defined and separate from the last, with a unique set of encounters that are probably the best in the series. Sierra 117 is the perfect introductory mission for newer players and to the new and kind of improved brutes, and you fight your first brute chieftain, getting a taste of arguably the most fun weapon in the game, the gravity hammer. In Crow's Nest, we get a more straightforward FPS experience with lots of close quarters combat and cool scripted sequences. In Savo Highway, we get a taste of Halo 3's vehicle combat. The Storm, we get our first Scarab, which is in many ways the first good boss fight we had in a Halo game. Floodgate reintroduced us to the Flood and their gross new ability to burrow into living hosts and turn them into combat forms or reanimate dead bodies, which made infection forms even more terrifying and helped the player prioritize shooting them first. And well, taking the evil popcorn creatures seriously. The Ark, we got to try some heavier vehicle combat and the chance to explore a more open environment similar to Combat Evolved's. The Covenant is just the single most fun mission in a Halo game ever, mixing everything that we previously encountered with an awesome closing act that resolves the Arbiter's character arc and sees us fighting alongside the Flood with awesome, completely unscripted moments that pit the game's AI against each other, and one final effort is just... whoo! Goddamn!
I count 2 scarabs! Repeat, 2 scarabs! Oh god, we're all gonna die!
Okay, I'm gonna stop now. That was... Yeah, I'm not really a vocalist. Cortana is slightly better than the library, and Halo brings us full circle with the death of a series-long on and off antagonist and supporting character, closing out the trilogy similarly to how it all began. Halo 3 is beautifully poetic in its execution, and while there are some holes in its story and it does share a lot of similarities to Combat Evolved's narrative, I'm willing to look past all that for the sake of how fun it is and how well it's presented. My opinion of Halo 3's multiplayer was tainted for a little while due to the god-awful MCC port that had bad hit registration, projectiles that moved slower than Star Trek the Motion Picture, and was plagued with other issues that made me wonder if my praise for the game was even warranted back in the day when I owned it on the 360. However, going back and playing the original and having the MCC port patched many times since then, I think it's safe to say that Halo 3 is the definitive Halo multiplayer experience and is about the closest thing to being perfectly balanced.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Max Hoberman, Halo 2's multiplayer design lead, stepped away from developing Halo 3's MP fairly early on, with Tyson Green stepping in to continue what Max had started. As such, a lot of Halo 2's strongest and most popular traits carried over. The battle rifle, dual wielding, a strong emphasis on competitive 4v4 maps, some of which are the best the series has to offer, and a competitive ranking system that simply rewarded you for doing well or penalized you for sucking ass with a straw. Where Halo 3 differs from its predecessor is in its pacing. Halo 2 was aggressively fast and unforgiving for those who didn't know what they were doing. The battle rifle spat out bullets rapidly, dual wielding introduced a whole bunch of balancing issues, and things like button combos made it a very unapproachable game after a while for newer players. Halo 2's skill ceiling was ridiculously high, and despite how fun it was, the game was, well, it was broken. It's a bit like Modern Warfare 2. Everyone loves Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer for how scuffed its balancing was. Every gun was OP, so none of them were. It all kind of evened out. Halo 3 is the fully realized version of what Max Hoberman started with Halo 2, while refining it and smoothing out some of the bugs and balancing issues that made Halo 2 so difficult for newer players to pick up and enjoy after a while. Instead of all the weapons bordering on being hit-scan monsters that can beam you with 100% accuracy from a light year away, Halo 3 backpedals a bit and picks up the projectile-based system of some of Combat Evolved's guns, meaning you have to lead your shots ever so slightly with certain weapons like the sniper rifle and battle rifle outside of a certain range. Equipment was also introduced in Halo 3, and unlike how it's handled in Infinite, where each piece gives the player a crazy boost in their solo capabilities, the equipment in this game was neutral and had either a negative or positive impact depending on how you used it. Throw down a bubble shield and you're invulnerable for a bit, but if someone has the balls to come in there and beat you up, they can take your shield and use it as their own cover. The power drain can be used to strip players of their shields and EMP vehicles, but it also doesn't discriminate and will affect you and your teammates' shields and vehicles too. That trip mine you threw down might have a green reticle when you look at it, but that doesn't mean someone on your team won't just walk over it like an idiot and boot you for apparently betraying them. Asshole, you should have... Use your eyes. It's a great big beeping pancake in the middle of a walkway. Just... It'd also be unfair to not mention Halo 3's incredible maps. I don't think there's a single map that released in Halo 3's life cycle that I could look at and think of as being bad, except for some of those god-awful Forge maps on Sandbox and Snowbound. I
fucking hate you.
Guardian, The Pit, Epitaph, Narrows, Valhalla, Sandtrap. I mean, Sandtrap, come on. As if that's not the most fun big team battle map of all time. The fact we haven't had a proper remake of Sandtrap, drivable elephants and all, That's an international tragedy as far as I'm concerned. The weapon sandbox in Halo 3, coupled with its physics engine, allows for some incredible ways to outplay your opponents that doesn't just come down to pure gun skill. If you know someone is coming at you with a rocket launcher and you have a gravity hammer or brute shot, you can use those weapons' gravity-defying traits to bounce the rocket away from you if you time it just right. Counter to Infinite's approach of handling things where they just take those intrinsic abilities away from the weapons to then implement them into a new piece of equipment that you need to shove into the sandbox in a vague hope that it'll give players a good reason to use it. Yeah, cool. Speaking of cool features being perfectly fine in one game and cut from another, armor customization. Halo 3 was such a big step up from what came before it, and actually incentivized you to play the campaign for unlockables in multiplayer. And I'm not just talking about a few fancy schmancy emblems, I'm talking full-on armor sets. If you saw someone running around the map with Hayabusa, at the very least you knew that person was either a massive weeb or had gotten the campaign skulls. If someone was running around with the katana chestplate or security, they had gotten themselves a lot of gamer score in Halo 3. If they had the rogue helmet, well, they'd done fairly well for themselves in multiplayer. If they had the recon helmet, bruh. You were dealing with a man who gave up on their social life for literal days, if not weeks, to complete those Vidmaster challenges. Probably the most sought after piece of armor ever, not just in Halo, but gaming in general. The armor was representative of your accomplishments and your skill at the game and had meaning behind it, as opposed to games that followed where it was all down to the grind or how lucky you were with loot boxes or how much disposable income you have. It's a system that still hasn't been topped and likely never will be. But all that is just the tip of the iceberg. Halo 3 did far more than just give us a near-perfect multiplayer, it also helped to shape the internet and marketing for video games as we know it. Prior to Halo 3's release, Halo had a very solid and broad online community, with everything from the competitive scene to machinima like Red vs. Blue being immensely popular and ingrained into internet pop culture for that era. All that was about to change once again, however, with the advent of a little platform, and you might have heard of it, called YouTube.
One site that's gaining enormous popularity is YouTube.
Launched in 2005, Halo just missed the YouTube train in its early days, with Halo 2 releasing a full year earlier. YouTube provided a platform for anyone to post whatever they wanted without being confined to the limitations of standard television, and have people from all walks of life around the world watch that content and enjoy it. It was a platform unlike any other and had knock-on effects to the rest of the internet at large. With a game as immensely popular as Halo 3 and a platform that was climbing sharply in popularity like YouTube, the two were bound to collide at some point, and oh boy, did they. The host of new features present in Halo 3, like Theater and Forge, allowed players to not just play and replay Halo 3 in so many new ways, it also provided content creators with a canvas to tell stories that were funny.
Run for your life! He's got the Halo 1 pistol!
Or heartfelt.
A puppy. In Halo 3.
Or ridiculously cringy in hindsight.
This will result your ass getting beat down by our uber banhammers. Titties.
I can't say this enough, but Theater releasing with Halo 3 was the best thing Bungie could have done. I don't know if it was something they planned after seeing the upsurge in user-made content created in their games and uploaded to places like YouTube, or if it was entirely because they just wanted to push the envelope even further with innovation, or it could have been all of the above, but they blew it out of the park. I know we're quick to jump on Machinima for being a scumbag network that collapsed for good reason, but back in the olden days, it was a powerhouse that helped popularize all the amazing work that other smaller content creators were making, and YouTube was the perfect platform to share it on. Machinima, and I'm talking about the genre, not the channel now, was essentially like free advertising for Halo 3. If you were browsing YouTube in 2007 to about 2009, you were likely to come across 3 different types of videos. Conspiracy theories with the Requiem for a Dream soundtrack or Let the Bodies Hit the Floor blaring over the top of a poorly made Windows Movie Maker slideshow, a tutorial recorded by an unregistered hypercam with some typing on a notepad with Dreamscape by 009 sound system in the background that led into a Rickroll, or one of the many absurd Machinima shorts or tutorials made on Halo 3. And this was pure genius from a marketing standpoint. Why make advertisements for your game when you can get the fans to do it for you? Why waste time recording interviews with developers explaining what Halo 3 is all about when there are countless videos online that capture the absurd, sandboxy moments and online interaction of the game in a short 5-minute video likely edited over 2 cans of Mountain Dew gamer fuel in 6 hours? Along with the arrival of social networking platforms like Facebook and Ew, MySpace.
Hey, can I get on that thing to check my MySpace?
Fuck MySpace!
Came new ways to share these videos with your friends. It was exactly what Bungie and Microsoft needed to make Halo 3 a success, selling it through word of mouth and community-made projects, and not trailers made by a committee. It was cool, it was hip, and above all, it was different. It's a tactic you see employed a lot nowadays with game releases. Give it to the hip and cool content creators or streamers to play or partner with them or use them in your advertisements, and surely all the kids will buy the game, right? Right? You can smell the corporate interference from a mile away, whereas this was all made out of love for the game, and not because Big Daddy Microsoft was watching them from the doorway of their bedroom with their finger on the money button. Halo 3 also offered endless amounts of replayability through its Forge mode. What started as Bungie's way of allowing players to slightly alter their maps eventually became a full-on map creator with downloadable content additions like Foundry and Sandbox. This created a whole other way for the game to survive and thrive for years after its release. If you've played through the campaign 100 times or had enough of getting your ass beat in MP, you can hop into a custom games lobby with some friends or some randos and play an absurd mix of game types that twist Halo's mechanics and gameplay in ways that the developers likely never intended but still work so damn well. Each one of these game modes and their maps was they were like a Matryoshka doll, a mini game that was based on a game mode inside a larger game that was Halo 3. And the variety of these custom games is what kept people coming back to play Halo 3 for so long after its release, coupled with the file share system that allowed you to share screenshots, videos, game types, and maps, and have them featured on your profile for people to access easily and share around to even more people, and the fact that you could just see it in the pre-game lobby. Just go to that dude's profile, click on it, and what's in his file share? Where's that in modern Halo games, my guy? It changed the game from being, well, a game to a platform in and of itself. Halo 3 allowed people to creatively express themselves by making their own game types, their own maps, their own cutscenes, their own screenshots, with the tools Bungie had provided for them. It was unlike anything the world had ever witnessed before, and without it, we wouldn't have seen the creation of iconic series like Rooster Teeth's Fails of the Week, Arby and the Chief, and so much more. It was a self-sustaining cycle that kept the game alive, and all Bungie had to do was to keep the fans happy with occasional patches or DLC map packs, and the whole world just loved it. There were simpler times back then. Halo 3 can't be ranked or measured compared to other games in my opinion because it was leagues ahead of all the competition and years ahead of its time, innovating in ways that the rest of the industry wasn't even thinking about. We're seeing games release now that are playing catch up to Halo 3 despite it releasing 14 years ago. How can a game that released 14 years ago have all this? Despite the trouble that Bungie had with its lack of leadership and legal battles with Microsoft, they powered through that and released something that was more than just another Halo game. They could have made a slightly better version of Halo 2 with a great multiplayer and campaign, and people would have been more than happy with that. But Bungie raised that bar, threw it into the air, turned on fixed physics and Forge, and said, "Reach for that, fuckers!" And the only game that came close was ironically also called Reach, so yeah, I guess they did reach for it. With the sunsetting, which is just a nice way of saying the shutdown of the servers for the Xbox 360 Halo titles, I think it's important that we remember what we're leaving behind, and that we never forget the amazing games that led us to this point. That's been my purpose in doing this retrospective series, shining a light on the games that led us here and giving one final salute to them, to the memories they gave us, the friends we made, and to the amazing developers who poured every waking hour of their lives for several years into these endeavors, every shred of creative thought, of problem-solving capability, of coding knowledge, of music composition or art design into these incredible pieces of art. These time capsules that have transcended the medium of just being video games. Which is why I'm doing something a little different with this video. With the shutdown of the Xbox 360 servers and the Halo titles on that console, I'm making a request for us to go back and play them one last time. Seeing Halos 3, Reach, and 4 in all their fancy HD glory with all these new options on the Master Chief Collection is great. But they're not the same. Halo Infinite might not have released too long ago, but those seasonal events are temporary. The memories these classic games gave us are forever. The laughs, the rages, the moments of sheer joy or confusion, these games are going to be gone soon, and we'll never get the chance to play them again as they were for very much longer. If you're a certified Halo 4 apologist like I am, and you want to go back and play it in all of its 25 frames per second glory on a good day, and chalk up some kills in Big Team, or hop into one of its exclusive game types like Dominion, Extraction, or Regicide, do it. If you loved Reach and couldn't get enough of its progression and playing custom games with your mates, hop in there with them and see how far you can rank up in the next few weeks. If you loved Halo Wars or ODST, get back into some Firefight or select all those units and start playing. Or if Halo 3 is your waifu and you do anything for her, then you might just catch me in a lobby of Big Team or Lone Wolves. Get those old game discs out, put them into your Xbox, and give them the send-off they deserve. Don't let them fade out with a whimper. Don't let them be forgotten about. Send them out with a bang. I wouldn't normally ask for this, but share the video around. Get the hashtag trending. Make your own videos on the 360 era Halo games. And let's finish this fight one last time.
For their decision required courage beyond measure. Sacrifice and unshakable conviction that their fight, our fight, was elsewhere.
It's been an honor serving with you, John.
It's not over. Not yet.